Hey guys, how are all of you doing? Hope fine, and yes, this is the next part of Game of Shadow in Naruto World. Where I am in the Naruto world. I have a name that isn't mine and I have a really nerfed version of the gamer. Is that all? Am I forgetting something? Right, inventory. At that I received yet another disappointment. Let's start without any delay. I'm Ig Sato, I said, my voice doing a pretty good impression of Inara. Quite honestly, this definitely wasn't how I had seen this day going at all. I had half expected to be alone, with the other 9 in some variation of the teams. That wasn't the issue, not really. However, after the hit I had taken with the unchanged teams, I really didn't have the energy to deal with a female version of Naruto in adult form. My new sensei blinked at me and tilted her head. For a second there, I thought that she would point out my lack of enthusiasm in some form. What I didn't expect, or appreciate at all really, was for her to give me a positively unsettling grin. Well, what are you waiting for? You are coming with me, brat, she said, and, without waiting for a second, she left through the door. I, for my part, took a second to gather my thoughts with a deep breath in before sighing and going after her. See you later, guys, I said while waving over my shoulder. I blinked as I closed the door behind me. Anko hadn't been behind the door, or even close by, at all. Instead, she was already standing over at the academy's gates, grin still in place and sending a come here gesture my way. Well, enough sulking, I told myself as I settled my thoughts. I could deal with my thoughts on canon changes after going home. With another deep breath, this time followed by a small smirk, I set off running after my sensei. What followed was me chasing after the madwoman through the village. And I call her that because she made me take paths that were absolutely insane. I had to cross streets full of people at top speed while keeping my eyes on her so that I wouldn't lose her. I had to follow her inside shops where she would continue by coming out the back door. My eyes widened though, when I saw her shape getting further and further away. Knew how, I thought, a small frown appeared on my face. Not happening, lady. Running. And with that little boost, I slowly started regaining ground. Good thing too, because I hadn't wanted to use the more expensive free running. Oh, you gotta be kidding me. I thought as she once more picked up the speed. Well, here goes nothing. Free running. And this time, I got closer much faster. Problem was, I was burning through my energy points, and if I needed to do some kind of test after this chase ended, I would be already at a disadvantage. Granted, that was probably the whole point, but it was still bad for me. Thank Kami, it ended quickly, I sighed in relief as she stopped and turned around casually, showing no signs of exhaustion. However, I stopped on a rooftop right before jumping down next to her. Living with Naruto had given me, not really a sixth sense for traps, but I had learned to keep an eye out for those. Even if I wasn't his target often, I didn't want to fall for a prank aimed at someone else. And there was a trap right there. Saw that, did you? She asked, her smirk widening. I was starting to think that I wouldn't get a Kakashi that gave me even a day to prepare for their test. I wondered to myself if I had shot myself in the foot with my attitude in the academy. I hadn't thought it was that bad, but maybe she overreacted a bit for some reason. I suddenly felt the urge to smack myself. She may actually have reason to take offense, being who she was. Anko tapped her foot on the ground and the trap disabled itself. I blinked and tilted my head at that before giving up on deciphering how that even worked. Probably something with seals. Regardless, I would have to ask Naruto that later, surely he would have at least an idea. I apologize for my attitude just now. I started as I got down from the roof. I wasn't in a good mood right that moment. You good now? She asked mockingly, her head tilted to the side. The smirk seemingly fixed on her face. I simply nodded, inwardly grimacing. I really hadn't done myself any favors. Good, because I won't be teaching a brat that thinks the world will bow to him, no matter how much everyone says he is a prodigy. That's fair, I nodded again while setting my face in my best neutral expressing. I mentally prepared myself for any test that she could throw your strongest jutsu at me. Instantly, my right hand went to the small of my back, getting the folded Fuuma Shuriken that rested horizontally on my hip. Pulling my arm back up, with the weapon already firmly on my grasp, I unfolded it and threw it in the air. While it flew up, my hands went through 5 seals. As I finished, my right hand once more snapped to the side, this time picking the Fuuma Shuriken from the air. The weapon instantly started cackling with lightning even before I had thrown it at my sensei. It never connected though. Not because she dodged or deflected it, but because it went straight through her after she exploded in a cloud of smoke. Shadow clone. I wondered idly before I heard my jutsu hit the village's outer wall and stopping. Obviously, it didn't do anything. According to the academy, the walls could withstand B-rank jutsu like they were love taps and A ranks for a good while. I was inclined to believe them, since the walls were a very important part of the village defenses. No hesitation whatsoever, I heard right beside me and I almost jumped at the voice. That's neat. I would have felt insulted otherwise. Anyone that can't evade that can't even be considered a good Chuunin. Considering that I told you to throw it at me, she explained, looking off towards where the Fuuma Shuriken now lied on the ground. It was pretty strong though, and you were fast enough, I guess. Seems like there was some truth on your teacher's words. The throw was very accurate too. Shuriken jutsu is one of my strong points. I didn't get to practice with Fuuma Shuriken much, but I think I'm decent with it, I offered casually. It was the truth, really, and considering that she had been just standing there, there was no way I would fail. I read your profile, brat, I know more about you than you know about yourself, she said with mirth in her voice. I made sure to keep my face from showing anything. It was doubtful that she did, in fact, know more about me than I did. Especially regarding my skills, since I had all that very detailed in my skills and perks lists. Let alone my secret past life. Then what was this about? I asked with a raised eyebrow. To get a feel of you as a person, she readily answered. I know a fair bit due to your profile too, but I prefer to learn that by myself. You seem to be pretty laid back, although once you need to, you can be the most serious kid I've ever seen. Not sure that's a good thing or not though, she tilted her head, as if try to decide on that last point, before shrugging. Anyway, do you even know anything about me? She asked jokingly. Anko Mitarashi, I started immediately. That I did answer seemed to catch her by surprise. There seems to be fair bit of mistrust directed at you from the civilians, and some shinobi to her credit, her expression didn't even twitch. Something about your sensei, although I couldn't quite hear that part. There's a fair amount of ninja that defend you though. I hadn't lied about any part of it, nor had I relied in my folk knowledge either. All that had been picked up from my outings and, most importantly, our meals out in the Akimichi restaurants with the group. I had gathered a fair bit of information about a lot of people, even some that I had no prior knowledge of. Those though, I had to take the information with a grain of salt, since I had no way of confirming their veracity. It wasn't overly useful knowledge though. Nobody gossiped about a ninja's skills, obviously. But it was enough to get a feel about how someone was as a person. Which I guessed was the part that nobody cared to hide. You don't pull your punches, do you? She asked with a raised eyebrow. There's no point, I shrugged with an easy grin. Just like you, I prefer to learn about people myself instead of relying on others' opinion. I'm sure you know why, I added, my face twitching into a sneer for a second. Her smirk then lost a dangerous edge that I hadn't even realized was there until it disappeared. Note to self, Jounin are scary, Takubetsu or otherwise, I mentally reminded myself. Well, it's good to have that out of the way, she started easily. I guess I can put up with you until you get to be a Chunin, brat. Not that it'll take you long according to your profile. Then she clapped her hands together. And that's that about knowing each other. Maybe I'll tell you more about me, maybe I won't. But I don't need to know more about you, I've had to read more than enough. I'll see you tomorrow at the crack of dawn at Training Ground 44, brat. Don't be late. And with a cloud of smoke, she was gone. Wasn't 44, the forest of death? Of course, why the hell not? I grimaced, before turning to walk back home. That definitely wasn't how I had expected my introduction to my sensei to go, I mused. Before I could even take another step though, something stopped me. New title acquired, Genin of Konoha. New title acquired, Anko Mitarashi's apprentice. Not unexpected, I thought to myself. Maybe this is why I didn't get anything for passing in first place at the graduation test. Well, let's take a look at these. Genin of Konoha. Increases stats when taking part on a Konoha-sanctioned mission by 10%. Increases skill efficiency when taking part on a Konoha-sanctioned mission by 5%. That was a nice title to have. I still preferred my development-based ones, but I would certainly switch to this for every C rank that I had to take part in, just in case. As for the second one, Anko Mitarashi's apprentice. Improves the rate at which your stats and skills level up by 25% while under Anko Mitarashi's guidance. Further improves the rate at which fire release and yin release jutsu level up by 20%. Further improves the rate at which poison-related skills level up by 20%. I whistled as I looked at it. The overall increase under her guidance was 10% higher than Prodigy's effect. The other parts had me a bit confused until I realized that those also applied when I trained on my own. That was very good. Granted, I wasn't big on genjutsu, which was the focus of yin release, and I didn't even know that much about fire jutsu theory, let alone any technique at all. It would, however, come in handy to add some diversity to my skillset. The last part sounded interesting and, besides wondering if it applied to the resistance skill I was working on, I mused which type of skills this would work on. Maybe some poison jutsu. I blinked, maybe I could get a poison crafting skill of some kind. So far I had only been using raw versions from the plants in my garden. Things to consider and possibly bring up with my new sensei, I guess I decided in the end. Oh. Hey, guys. I greeted, waving towards the group that was waiting for me at our place. Unsurprisingly, none of the members of Team 7 was there. The poor bastards were probably still waiting at the academy for Kakashi to show up. Ig, how was your introduction? Ino asked, a smile in place. I guess theirs went well. All of them looked normal or a bit excited. I took note of Hinata's slightly hunched shoulders though, as I went to reply. It was interesting, I decided after a pause. I think pulling a shika right from the start worked against me, but I managed to fix it. The woman had me free running through the village and throw a flashing shuriken at her. After that we talked for a bit and that was that. There was a moment of silence as everyone blinked at me. Why did I expect anything normal coming from you? Ino sighed. Hey, I'll have you know. Then I stopped and tilted my head. Never mind, what about you, guys? She shook her head at me. Asuma-sensei was pretty cool. Chaoji started enthusiastically. He asked us where we wanted to go for a meal and then had us introduce ourselves while eating. He took Shika's attitude pretty well though, Ino added. He was nice, Shika offered with a shrug. I bet he was. I smirked at him. Anyone that didn't bother him for being lazy was nice to him. Kyoinai-sensei took us to a nearby park to do the introductions. Shino started then with his monotone voice. Everything went relatively well from there. She seemed pleasant enough. I'll take it that the relatively was due to Kiba. I asked with a raised eyebrow. The Inuzuka had stopped being antagonistic ever since I showed him up in my first year here, but he was still just as obnoxious. He seemed of the mind that being in the same team made us friends. The Aburam nodded as he continued explaining. That attitude wasn't well received, and in Hinata's case. I'll be okay, the Hyuga girl interrupted, although everyone could see that she was fairly withdrawn. It was like a fair bit of the progress we had made had regressed. I hated seeing her like that. I'll get used to it. I regarded her for a moment after those words. You shouldn't have to, Ino, instead, instantly jumped in his friend's defense. It seemed that Hinata had taken Sakura's best friend spot, while the pink-haired girl had been relegated to friend only. We'll show the annoying mutt. Just you wait. We'll do nothing, I decided, putting a stop to the Yamaneka's declaration of war. Said girl turned to me with her best scandalized expression. Hinata said we'll deal with it. We can't always be there to help her with this kind of things. She has to learn to deal with other people besides us. Besides, her new sensei should be able to pick up on that problem and solve it herself if she needs to. I know that, but... That said, I continued without letting the blonde speak. His personality being annoying and him actively making trouble are different things. We'll deal with the mutt if it comes to that, just let us know. That seemed to pacify the irate girl and made Hinata relax a little. Thanks. I'm sure it'll be fine though, she said, nervously pushing her index fingers together. I'm sure it'll be, I said with a smile. My eyes, however, went to the silent Shino on the side. He nodded at my silent request. The Hyuga heiress was much too shy and nice to actually come to us for help. The Aburam would have no such problems. Where are those three though? Ino grumbled then, her good mood apparently ruined as she tapped her foot on the ground, head snapping from side to side looking for the missing three. It can't have taken them so much longer than us. Well, we could wait inside with some tea, I guess, I offered, inwardly smirking. We would probably be waiting for at least 1 more hour. Oh. Naruto POV. 3 hours. Kakashi, I refused to call him sensei, had made us wait for 3 damned hours. The nerve of the guy. Although, he had taken the small prank I set up like a champ. It was simple and childish, a simple seal on the floor that made his hair turn pink. Any Chunin would have been able to avoid it. I would know, I knew what those couldn't dodge, after all. Kakashi probably had his reasons for taking it, but I really couldn't care less at the moment. IG would probably scold me for doing that to my new teacher, but the bastard had it coming. Anyway, after that, Introductions were an underwhelming chore to get through. I had expected more out of the meeting with what could be my team for some time. Not that I had any problems with them, really. Sajuk was cool, even if he was a bit of a jerk. He had gotten better after the last year or so though. Now we tolerated each other. It was progress. I think. Anyway, the point is that he didn't look at us like we were useless anymore. The guy could even be friendly-ish, a bit, not much though. Ahem. Then there was Sakura. I could freely admit that I had been slightly mistaken on how I viewed her a few years back. But she was still super smart, and kinda pretty. Even if I wouldn't admit that. But her personality certainly wasn't pleasant. It said something that I was happier having Sajuk in my team than her. She only really seemed to care about Sajuk, Ino and maybe Hinata. It made hanging out with her slightly unpleasant, not gonna lie. As for our teacher, he reminded me of Shikamaru, actually. Although he seemed even more on the annoying side of lazy smartness. Especially when he refused to actually tell us anything with his introduction, if we could call it that. We barely knew his name, for Kamisake. Okay. So, maybe my team wasn't the one I would have wanted, at all. But it could have been worse. At least I wasn't in the same team as Kiba. I shuddered. Shino and Hinata had my condolences. But all that didn't matter. Why? Because the introduction was out of the way and we were going home at last. And what that meant was that we would have a meal at home with the whole group made by IG. I could already taste all that goodness. Even though there wouldn't be any ramen, it would be the next best thing. Before we could even leave the academy though, something interrupted us. Naruto, I stopped on my way, Sajuk and Sakura doing the same, although both bowed instantly when they saw who had spoken. Sakura, Sajuk. Good afternoon. Gigi. I exclaimed as a way of greeting, almost jumping to hug him. Naruto. Show the Hokage some respect. Sakura chided, almost shouting. I stuck my tongue at her. Kami, she was worse than IG with that stuff. At least my brother let me be while he worried about it. It's fine, Sakura. Gigi waved off easily as always. Good afternoon, Hokage-sama. I apologize for my teammate. There's nothing to apologize for, Gigi countered. Hokage-sama. Sajuk greeted stiffly as always, getting a nod from the old man. Sajuk, then he turned towards me. I apologize for cutting this short, but I wanted to talk with Naruto in private. Of course, Hokage-sama. Of course. And with that, my two teammates waved at me and left. It didn't really matter. We would meet back at our house anyway. Meanwhile though, Gigi guided me towards an empty classroom. So, what did you want to talk about? I started cheerily before pausing at Gigi's serious expression. I hadn't seen him with a face like that since. I gulped. Since he had told me about Fuinjutsu. He smiled sadly as he saw my face change from grinning to uneasy. Sometimes I forget how perceptive you can be, Naruto, he stated. I had the distinct impression that he was calling me an idiot. I do want to talk about something rather important. Is it about my family? I asked, my voice, usually loud and excited, low and nervous. Not really, but almost as serious. My shoulders dropped. Or that's what I would have said. But you have had remarkable progress in the academy and I've seen you grow much from the child you were. I think I can tell you something about your family too. I perked up instantly, almost beaming at his proud smile. First though, Gigi continued, face turning grim once more. I think it's overdue time for you to know why the village reacts the way it does towards you, Naruto. I paused at that. I didn't really know how to react to that. I had always wanted to know, but at the same time, I had always dreaded to find out. Was it due to my parents? Had they been bad people? Gigi had always denied that, but then what was it? Was it me? Was there something wrong with me? And, as I heard Gigi explain, I realized that yes, it was me. The Kyuubi, the nine-tailed demon fox, was sealed inside of me. Granted, knowing Fuinjutsu as I did, even if it wasn't that much yet, I knew that I wasn't the demon itself, which more than one villager seemed to have problems acknowledging. Still, everything made sense now. For most, it must have been like seeing a prisoner's cage being dragged in front of them. I just had the bad luck of being said cage. All those people that had. Oh no, I whimpered, making Gigi look visibly pained. Naruto. Ig. I said, tears threatening to fall from my eyes. He said that his parents, what will he? He already knows. That made me stop and gap at him. My mouth working but not quite producing any words. I told him after the incident that saw you two in your current residence. But, that was, more than a year ago. Ig had been hiding that for, that long. I assure you, Gigi continued, that the only reason he didn't tell you was because I asked him not to. I started, but even I didn't know just what I wanted to say. Maybe ask why, although I knew there must have been a good reason. Maybe just scream, to let out the years of sadness and anger. Maybe. What else did you want to tell me, Gigi? About my family. I could think about the Kyuubi later. Decide what I wanted to do then. But there were a number of things that I needed to do before that. And learning more about my family came before that. Came before many things, actually. Your mother were the first words he pronounced, and any thought about demons and whatnot left my mind instantly. Was an Uzumaki. You get your last name from her. What the Senju were to Konoha, they were to their home village Uzushogakure in the land of the whirlpools. And from there, I listened like I had never done so during class. I absorbed every word, every pause on Gigi's speech. Uzushogakure, the land of the whirlpools. I would have to look for more info on those. Ask Gigi some other time, maybe ask Ig for hell, right, there was a talk to be had there. I closed my eyes, silently mourning the loss I hadn't known I suffered until then, when the old man told me about the village being destroyed in war. I smiled, happy and proud, when he said that they were known and feared for their fuinjutsu. I was continuing their legacy, not just following my parents' steps. I had started because it was a connection, then I had liked it because it came natural to me and I could see its potential. But now I loved the art of seals. Eventually, though, the tale came to an end. And about my father. What was my mother's name? I asked then, my voice almost a whisper as I pushed the words past the lump in my throat. I can't tell you now, Gigi answered, her expression looking as hurt as I was sure mine was. But I'll do it. I'll tell you when you turn into a Chunin, Naruto. That's a promise. I stared at him for a long moment before nodding. I could live with that. I had accepted to wait, back during my birthday. And that hadn't changed now. I knew a bit more now and I would know it all eventually. Soon, I corrected mentally. I'll know all about them soon. Oh. Ig Povi. Naruto was a bit too subdued after he came back. And the fact that he came back alone a good hour later than Sakura and Sasuke was concerning. That it was the Hokage who had stopped the blonde for a private talk was telling. Couldn't give me a heads up, could you, Hiruzen? I wanted to sigh. What had the old man told my brother? There could be a number of answers to that question. About the Kyuubi. About Kushina. About Jiraiya. I doubted it, but Minato was an option too. And thus, why I was particularly nervous as we both sat alone at the table after everyone left. Gigi told me about the fox for a second there. I considered playing dumb. I instantly dismissed the thought. Lying to Naruto was not a good idea, much less about this. He told me that you knew. Thank Kami I hadn't followed that trap. He told me when we moved here, I admitted, and he nodded. For as expressive as my brother was, he was strangely unreadable now. It wasn't that he had a mask without emotion. It was just that the emotions he was displaying were difficult to read. Thank you, I blinked. Ha! I thought intelligently. That made no sense. I had expected him to be angry at me for hiding that. Or for him to be sad and hurt that I had betrayed his trust. Or maybe forgiving of that. But, thankful. It hadn't even crossed my mind. You lost your parents in the attack, you told me that he started, and I nodded, still a bit dumbfounded. Iji's parents had indeed died in the attack. Kami, how long has it been since I thought of Iji as, not me? So, thanks, for not hating me like everyone does. Not everybody hates you, Naruto, I tried to say, but he continued. I know, but nobody cared enough to help, before you. And then, his strange expression cleared and a sad smile took its place. So, thanks, for staying with me after finding out. Idiot, I said, returning his smile. You are my brother, you obnoxious brat. Didn't your sensei call you a brat too? He shot back, and then silence followed. You know. Gigi also told me about my mother, or, really, about the Uzumaki, which is where I got my last name instead of my father. They were awesome at Fuinjutsu, just like me. And then, what followed was my brother and I sharing a conversation about his family. It was, surprisingly, a very happy night for the both of us despite the unpleasant secret revealed then. This isn't what I was expecting when she said testing my skills, I thought to myself as my back hit a tree almost as thick as a small house. You see, my new sensei had decided to see what she had to work with, which was fine. However, I had been expecting her to let me fight against one of the known and varied animals, read, monsters, that populated the Forest of Death. I didn't expect her to say hi and immediately throw a kunai at my face. Fast forward a few minutes and there was I, dodging punches and kicks that would probably smack me against the forest floor or send me flying. It had started as a distance battle really, with both of us throwing kunai and shuriken at each other. She had given me a backhanded compliment when I added some spice to it by attaching tags to them. Some exploded, some didn't, some weren't even real tags. I had even tried to throw the shuriken at her feet so that they acted like improvised caltrops. That idea was a lot better before I realized that she could literally jump over me to end in the opposite direction. I would have to rain shuriken on the place to actually hinder her. And in the end I would probably make more trouble for myself than for her. I need to do something different, I concluded. Fighting normally wouldn't do. My teacher apparently didn't bother holding back more than it was necessary to not have me killed. This was easily proved by the numerous bruises that I could already feel forming all over my body even as I tilted my head to have a punch graze my cheek. Less than a second later I had to block a kick to my side that, while not sending me against the nearest tree, did push me almost a meter. I narrowed my eyes. A plan started forming. My eyes darted around every time I had a split second to think, which meant every time I was sent flying, regrettably. However, it ended up being productive, if painful. Okay, this idea sucks, but it's something I thought before I jumped back to avoid another kick. Normally I would jump over it instead of backwards. But Anko could and would hit me while airborne, so that was a no. With a semblance of a plan in mind, I waited for my opportunity, dodging what I could, blocking what I couldn't, and more often than not I was still hit once or twice in between. "If you never attack, this will never end, brat," she half demanded and half mocked. I ignored her while crouching under a jab and rolling away from a punch downwards. As I went to stand up, my opportunity came. Perfect timing, I thought, hiding a smirk. A kick was coming down towards my head and I enacted my plan. Preparing myself for what followed, I jumped towards the kick, which means up and head first into the kick. Her heel hit the back of my head and, being mid-jump, had me doing a front flip. That exactly what I wanted though, and according to plan I extended my leg and my foot connected with her face. Either because of the surprise or because of the actual feat, she stumbled back. Before I could even land on the floor, I was already running through hand seals. And thus, immediately after my feet touched the dirt, I sent 2 handfuls of lightning-infused shuriken her way. Unsurprisingly, she jumped over them easily enough. "That's more like it, but you'll have to try." Her little speech after landing was interrupted as I pulled my hands to the sides and with the ninja wires attached to the previously thrown projectiles. Before the threads could wrap her up though, she once more simply jumped over it. "I can see the ninja wire, brat." "I'm not blind," she mocked. I clicked my tongue as I jumped with all my strength to the side to avoid her, since she had thrown herself towards me as she dodged. I had also decided to activate all my energy-based skills to take advantage of Poised's effect, which had intermediate taijutsu and free running, boosting my jumping distance. That would have had me covering a good deal of distance, but the wires still wrapped around my fingers got stuck on a tree and thus I flew in a circle around it before I cut the threads. That didn't matter, that was part of the plan too. "Cammy, does it feel weird thinking that phrase so much in such a short time?" I mused idly. Still, it had been part of it, since the shurikens had had the wire wrap around another pair of trees, thus creating a net of sorts between those and the one I had just flew around. Said net was now right between me and my sensei, giving me some room for thought. Okay, first of all my hands smacked together and I casted Genjutsu Dissipation, just in case. Not surprisingly, a few of the trees around me disappeared together with a few rocks. Good thing the ones I needed were real, if not I would have been in trouble. Second of all, I thought with a grimace as Anko shook her head exasperatedly and jumped over the net, leaving me almost trapped inside a trap of my own making. "Really, you must be desperate to do all that just to get away for a second," she pointed out amusedly as she landed right in front of me. "So, ready for another beating?" "Not really," I said. "Have you looked down?" I asked, raising an eyebrow at her. When she did so, her eyes widened. There, right between us, I had dropped a piece of paper attached to a kunai. One of the ones that hadn't exploded from before. I had put a small genjutsu on her while I had been flying around the tree like a Spider-Man rip-off. Apparently, it had worked. And with a touch of my foot, I sent enough chakra to activate it instantly instead of with a delay. The both of us were sent flying and the both of us smacked right into the ninja wires I had set up. My hands, which had already been mid-motion when I made her look at the explosive tag, finished the set of signs and my fingers wrapped around the wire behind me. It was a good thing that intermediate Taijutsu increased all physical skills, which included constitution, which in turn meant that I could withstand just that bit more. I heard a yelp through the cloud of dust left behind by the explosion as an electric current traveled through the wires due to stunning thread. That's 2 hits, I thought to myself. I was very proud of that, to be honest. She was holding back, a lot, but she was still a Takubetsu Jounin, which in my mind gave me reason to be smug. Now, what else can I do? The end I heard behind me and then felt the cold touch of steel against my throat. Very good job, Igi. I blinked at her using my actual name. It had been the first time she hadn't called me brat. I see all that praise you get isn't for nothing. Thanks, I replied simply as she pulled away the kunai and I turned to look at her. Now then, we can work on lots of things with you. We'll have a spa like this every day no matter what though. From there, we can work on adding some more jutsu to your list, lightning obviously, but we'll also add 1 or 2 from another element too. I recommend fire, since that's my affinity and thus the one I know the most, but you can choose. We can improve your chakra control some more after we add some diversity to your repertoire. I'm fine with that, I shrugged. I'm also very good with poisons, and I know you are good with senbon even if you didn't use any just now. They work very well together, I would know. That's another option. We may even get far enough to work on some poison jutsus that I know. I wanted to work on that, to be honest, I replied with a small smile. I have a garden at home with some poisonous plants. Was actually thinking about looking into making some more complex poisons with them, to be honest at that. My teacher gained a glint in her eyes that should have unnerved me. I like how you think, kid, she nodded with a predatory grin. Third option is taking advantage of your medical training and seeing about adding a healing jutsu to your repertoire. Fourth is genjutsu. So she tilted her head at me as she continued. Which one do you think? I narrowed my eyes and took a moment to think about it. Do you favor any of those options? She smirked at me. I'm partial to the first 2 options, if I'm perfectly honest with you. But all of them are valid and equally good choices, she unhelpfully answered, and I sighed. Ninjutsu and Iorojutsu, I think I decided in the end. You think? She raised an eyebrow at me and I nodded. I haven't had much time to think about it, but those were my choices when presented with the electives at the academy, so the reasoning stands. Third place would be poisons and fourth would be genjutsu. I could already grind dissipation, which was what I wanted, after all. I guess I see it, she nodded. Good then, for today though, we'll work on taijutsu and physical conditioning. Would it be okay if I studied poisons when I'm not training with you? That would be nice, since I would get to take advantage of the title I got from being her student to the fullest. She raised an eyebrow at me with a somewhat amused expression. I really like how you think, even if you sound a bit like a training maniac. My eye twitched at the training maniac part. Yeah, I'll get you some scrolls for you to read in your free time. Before you do any mixes, run them by me though, and I mean that. The last part was added with serious glare, to which I quickly nodded. Good, now, let's get to work. Oh. Wow, these are pretty good, I muttered with my mouth still full. I know, right? My sensei said with a smug smirk, and I had a sort of flashback to that first time Naruto taken me to Ishiraku's. The situation wasn't much different, considering that Anko had all but dragged me all the way from the forest of death to the dango shop that she apparently loved. I gotta say though, she continued, picking what must have been her 20th stick. You did a lot better than I thought I would, sure hope so, considering that I had put up with a physical training that was almost as bad as Guy's. Props to you, little guy. Thanks, I said simply while eating another dumpling. You didn't mention anything about missions before, I pointed out after swallowing. Yeah, we won't be doing much of those, she replied dismissively. One a day or something like that, since I'm told you don't need much money to spend really. Also, you are a team of one, so don't expect to do any C ranks for a while. It'd be more annoying than it needs to be. I blinked at that. I made some sense, but at the same time. No, she continued with a wave of her hand. I'm here to get you to Chuanin level as fast as possible, which is what I'm going to do. Missions are usually for experience purposes, but the higher-ups think that dealing with me gives enough experience. Neither her words nor her grin did anything to reassure me. Not to mention the forest of death, she added as an afterthought before taking another dumpling hole in her mouth. My eye twitched. Questions? None, I grumbled as I continued eating. Oh. Third person POV, Anko. They had told Anko that she would be training a prodigy. She hadn't believed it though. After all, no prodigy ever graduated at the standard age. All of them graduated early, some by a few years, some much earlier. Many would argue that Jiraiya of the Sanin's case was like that. They would be wrong. The old pervert wasn't a prodigy. He was just a beast of hard work, just like Might Guy. They broke through common folks' limits to join the prodigies in their ranks. But she was getting sidetracked. Ig Sato wasn't a prodigy. Ig Sato wasn't even a hard worker. No, he was something else. Her first expression had told her that he was either too lazy and that was why he had graduated when he did, or he was a spoiled brat that had everyone worshipping the ground he walked on. Neither could be more wrong though. Without even a proper order, just a semblance of a task, the boy had followed her through the village like his life depended on it. He had even reached speeds that would put recently promoted Chuanin to shame. That had been her first clue. Then he had seen her trap, another mini-test she had set up. This time it didn't surprise her as much, considering who he lived with. Still, that he had noticed after all that running was impressive. And he didn't even look all that tired to boot. After that he had proceeded to attack her as soon as the words left her mouth. No genin should react so quickly to a request like that. It spoke volumes of his obedience, trust or apathy. All things considered, it had to be the first one though, or he disguised the third one very well. Especially after the way he responded to her asking what he knew of her. Also, knowing that much about her without ever meeting and without good reason almost raised a red flag in her mind. But she had read his profile. He had so many background checks and the like that, if he was a spy, he might be the best in the world. Then had come the second day, the first proper one. And Anko Mitarashi came to a few realizations. The first one was that the academy had failed to properly measure the boy's skills. Not that she could fault them. They focused a lot in individual skills and worked on them in an isolated fashion. This meant that they couldn't have known what IG truly was. They would never had known the way the boy's mind worked and chained every action that he did. None of his attacks were without a second purpose. Even when he was dodging and blocking, he tried to do something else other than just that. Punches were used to add momentum to the next attack, same for kicks. All projectiles either had a ninja wire on them or a tag, real or not, activated or not. And then came his mind, frightening thing that it seemed to be. That first kick after using her own attack to power his was a good idea. She had seen it coming, true, but a Chuanin might have fallen for it. So, she had taken it, because the kid deserved to connect that hit after the beating she had given him. It was what followed that was the true surprise. First of all, his sparkling shuriken, weak jutsu that it was done in a way that scared her out of her mind. It wasn't that he had mastered it, no, it was the fact that all 8 shuriken were powered equally. She knew Jounin that couldn't execute the jutsu with the exact same level of power in each shuriken. Second of all, she had almost let him get her with the wires. That was the second time he would have gotten a Chuanin. But this time, she didn't take it. Anko wanted to see what he would do once that failed. And boy was she intrigued by what followed. The pseudonets of ninja wire were an interesting tactic. Although, she couldn't see what IG wanted to do with them. Had he come up with a plan to use them as a terrain advantage? She had been right. Too right, actually. He had genuinely gotten her with that genjutsu over the kunai, surprisingly enough. And that would make more than one person go wide-eyed. What most didn't know was that she was Takubetsu Jounin in name only. There were some people that would throw a fit over her getting to be a proper Jounin. So, the Hokage had decided to give her all the benefits of a Jounin while keeping her actual rank at Takubetsu Jounin. By that point everyone knew how things were, even those that were dead set against her. But nobody cared or had enough power to take it to the Hokage. The man had been indulgent enough of their ridiculous demands, he had once told Anko. And she quite liked things like that. She could slack off duties that she wouldn't have been able to as a Jounin, which suited her just fine. Back to the point though, this brat had gotten her with a genjutsu. Never mind the absolute batshit crazy plan of hitting both of them with the explosion so that they were thrown against the net before hitting her with the stunning tread jutsu. To say that she was impressed with what she was seeing would be an understatement. Anko took note of the way his eyes shone at the mention of all the training options. And after seeing how he could withstand the Chuanin physical training that she put him through in the guise of genin training, she realized that he knew how to work hard. And now, the Mitarashi looked at her student from the corner of her eye at the dango shop. She added to the growing mental list how he just accepted that he wouldn't go on many missions, let alone actual missions. Going over the list now that she had a moment to think, she came to her second realization. Her student wasn't a prodigy. Her student wasn't a hard worker. Ig Sato was a monster. For a second, in her mind, the boy's red eyes turned yellow and his pupils turned slitted. A cold chill ran down her spine. Oh. So, you blew yourself up, Hana deadpanned. Yup, I nodded, smiling down at the puppy that was licking my face demanding attention. I can still feel the burns. You are crazy, the vet shook her head in disbelief. You absolute madman. Thanks. It wasn't a compliment. She rolled her eyes at me when I smirked at her. Anyway, how have things been going over here? I asked curiously. Not too much work, honestly, which is good, she said with a smile. Yeah, I got it, not much work meant that the dogs out there weren't being injured. And I have to thank you again, since you've started coming these guys have been getting calmer and calmer. Happy to help, I grinned as I petted another puppy's head. The little guy apparently had gotten a little jealous of the one sitting on my lap. I love these little troublemakers. The dogs surrounding us and even the ones far away barked at me. And they love you too, Hana informed me unnecessarily. So, I was thinking about renting one of the smaller training grounds to take all of them for a day. Wanna come with? What kind of question is that? I asked, feigning an offended tone. An honest one, You idiot, she rolled her eyes at me. You already occupy most of your time training, and now that you are a genin I can't see you having much free time. I always have free time for these guys. I scratched one of the dog's belly as I spoke. Just let me know the day and I'll arrange for a free day with my sensei. I'm sure she'll agree. Hannah beamed at me before we went back to talk about the Ninken's adorableness, as usual. Oh. So, there was I, Naruto narrated dramatically. Face to face with the lazy-ass Jounin. Naruto, be more respectful towards Kakashi-sensei, Sakura chastised half-heartedly. I blinked at that. She was as big as I was about respecting those of higher standing. Was Kakashi that annoying? The traps were set, my blonde brother continued without a pause. Everyone was in position and then, out of nowhere, he threw this big-ass fireball at me. That's not what happened, Naruto. Sakura sighed while Sasuke looked like he wasn't even paying attention. And I dodged it. Naturally the Jinchuriki was undeterred though. That's when Sasuke threw his own fireball back and Sakura's clones charged in. And when the bastard Naruto, Sakura groaned, used substitution with a tree branch, he triggered the first layer of traps, getting shuriken rained upon everywhere within substitution range. The pink-haired girl apparently gave up as she face-palmed. But he dodged and parried all of them. He frowned in apparent frustration. It didn't matter though, since I activated the second layer of traps, making the area around him explode. From there, he was sent flying into the third layer, which covered him in ninja wire, and Sakura and Sasuke were able to get the bells. He pumped his fist in victory. Everyone deadpanned at him. So I stared, turning towards the girl of Team 7. What actually happened? IG. Naruto whined childishly. Well, once everything was set and we were about to start, Sakura paused for dramatic purposes that had Ino, Shika and I rolling our eyes at the hypocrisy. He said we passed. Just like that? I asked with a blink of my eyes. Yep, she nodded, with a believe it or not kind of expression. Said the whole point of the test was to see if we could work together, and we clearly could, so there was no need to actually go through it. He also praised Naruto's schemes, said Blonde preened at the last part, and I gave him a thumbs up. Well, good to see that everyone but me had it easy, I grumbled to myself. As if you would ever take the easy way. Shika rolled his eyes at me and I went to argue before I realized that he was right. It didn't stop me from grumbling some more though. But, were those layers true? Chaoji asked curiously. They were, Sasuke answered, almost shocking the rest of us. We all expected him not to talk if not directly talked to. He did comment sometimes, but it was exception than rule. Wow, a 3-layered trap, that's impressive. Without knowing the terrain beforehand, the Akimichi complimented, getting Naruto to throw a smug grin his way. There were 6 layers, actually, the blonde said, getting a shiver to travel down my back. His pranks and usual traps went up to 4 layers most of the time. Knowing that he had been taking it easy on the rest of the poor Konoha population was scary, to say the least. Have I ever told you that I'm really glad I'm your friend? Ino asked Naruto. Just for that, I'm cancelling your monthly prank, her fellow blonde said excitedly. The Yamanaka RS visibly deflated, relieved beyond belief, while everyone else groaned, most probably for not thinking about saying something along those lines to save their hide. The rest of the night was spent in relative calm, as everyone knew they would be really busy training and on missions from the next day onwards. As such, Shika and I played some shogi. The girls, for their part, had sat together on one end of the table and started chatting. On the other end, meanwhile, sat most of the rest, discussing food of all things. It seemed that my comment on a proper diet had awoken an interest of sorts in Sajuk. Shino, for his part, was somewhat on their group and mine at the same time, sitting in between and commenting here and there on both sides. Eventually though, everyone had to go for the night. Nobody wanted to stay up late when they had to wake up early for harder training than that of the academy. Even I, that used to go to bed much later than the rest, had plans to sleep early. However, someone had other plans, as just as I was standing up and setting aside my things to clean up the table, a piece of paper appeared on top of it. It made my eyes narrow, since it wasn't the usual folder but just a single square note. Picking it up after taking a deep breath in, I read the content and sighed. It was a task. It seemed that together with graduating the academy, I had also graduated from written assignments. On the paper was a specific list of things. Missions, to be exact. D-rank missions by the looks of it. Each of them detailed just enough for me to know the difference between them. Under every single one of them, was a task for me to do while on the mission. Some had me watching, read, stalking, someone. For what, I didn't know, but I knew enough to piece together that they wanted me to pick up on any strange behavior. Others, like the one that asked me to take Inuzuka dogs for a walk, had me looking for anything out of place through an area. And a number of other things. I noticed that most of them were simple observation. Which was good, since that would mean that I didn't have to be directly involved in anything and I probably wouldn't get in trouble for doing so. It was borderline espionage though, and that worried me to no end. As I bit my lower lip, trying to decide what to do, a scroll appeared on the table, together with another note. Picking up the latter first, I read, a little incentive from an ally. Now intrigued, I picked the scroll and read the title Jutsu Creation, Introduction. Part 1. I sat there, in the middle of the night and alone, for a long hour. My eyes darting from the scroll in my left hand to the list on right one. In the end, I closed my eyes and sighed wearily, flashes of a certain Uchiha ghost and rabbit goddess appearing in my mind. Opening my eyes, I took both things and made my way to my bedroom. Once there, I put both in my inventory, my decision taken. Have it your way, whoever you are, I thought to myself. I have to be the strongest, to live however I want to. No matter what. Bold of you to already be asking for a day off just to go on a date, brat. It's not a date, and it's literally going to happen in a week at the earliest. I was just making sure you didn't have plans that need me for longer than expected, not gonna lie, I explained with a shrug. Other genin would be terrified of talking back to their sensei. Anko raised an eyebrow at me and I shrugged again. But it's okay, I'll forgive you. Her smirk didn't reassure me at all, being perfectly honest. I can give you the day off. To tell you the truth, I was already thinking of ways to get you to stop training. Your profile suggested it quite earnestly. I felt my eyebrow twitch at that. Why did everyone insist that I was a training maniac? I wasn't fucking Mato guy. Was it wrong that I feared for my life enough to want to be as strong as possible? It wasn't even like I wasn't relaxing. Although, maybe most my hobbies being training related didn't help my image. So, this actually helps me, she continued, clearly unaware of my thoughts. Regardless of your love life, I decided to ignore the romantically oriented comment with a deadpan expression. I've got some nice little presents for you, my workaholic student. My eyebrow twitched again, even as my eyes focused curiously on the 3 scrolls that she presented before me. 2 of which were in shades of yellow and the third one a burnt orange. This one's, she said, shacking the former 2. A lightning jutsu. You've already got a nice set of 3, but all of them require tools from you. With that in mind, I picked these 2 specifically because they are in your level and don't need anything but your chakra and technique. First one, she started enthusiastically, vaguely reminding me of a commercial from TV. Is a D-rank offensive 1. Electromagnetic strike. You may have heard of its C-rank sibling, electromagnetic murder. It's essentially the same thing except that it can't reach the levels of damage that the latter can, but it sets a nice precedent to learn it afterwards. Secondly, she flicked up the remaining yellow one. The D-rank, electric flicker. A cousin of the body flicker, if you will, much more battle-oriented but less useful for simple traveling. It can be used both for movement and for kicking, although at most it'll be like being hit by a particularly powerful stunning thread. It also is far from silent even if it's not as loud as some other lightning techniques. I almost frowned at that. With options like this, since I considered that there must have been a few more elemental versions of this, why would Shy Sui focus so much on the body flicker? It seemed unnecessary. But maybe the silent use was more important than the damage. Yeah, that sounded about right. A stunning thread level of damage wasn't much, so maybe it could be ignored, something to look into, I guess. And lastly, a fire jutsu, to start adding some variety to your repertoire as we discussed, she said, throwing the orange scroll at me together with the other 2. It's an E rank though, since we are just starting and you don't have an affinity. We'll see about getting you a D or C rank latter if you master it. Simply called Embers, and it has an equally simple description. It's the weaker version of Fireball, which is also the weaker version of, you guessed it, Great Fireball. I kept my silence for a moment as I looked over the 3 scrolls. They sounded very good to me. 2 D ranks and an E rank from a different element was great, actually. Especially the part where none of them would need me to have any weapons like my other jutsu so far. You'll be reading those for the rest of the week in your free time, she dictated, and I realized that she really wanted to get that part over with. She had spent the whole time speaking in this rehearsed tone that almost sounded genuine but didn't quite make it. We'll start working on them next week or when you finish them. In a few weeks, you'll also start going to the Shinobi Hospital for your Airiao training 3 times a week aside from regular training. It's already been worked out. And once you get the techniques down, you'll be using your free time to study poisons. Sounds cool, I accepted, a smile forming on my face. This was already sounding loads better than the academy. I blinked as I looked up and saw Anko staring at me with a strange expression. You really are a fucking training maniac, she grumbled, and my eyebrow twitched again. What kind of kid hears about all that work and that kind of schedule and goes, oh, that's cool? I raised my finger, opening my mouth to argue. Then I remembered that I would have more than half a day dedicated to training with Anko, then 3 times a week I would have to work at the hospital, then I would have to study poisons, and then I would have the training I would do on my own. I slowly put my finger down and closed my mouth. Internally grumbling to myself, I settled for putting the scrolls inside an empty pouch that I carried on my hips just in case. Just don't start shouting about youth, kid, and we'll be fine, we shared a shudder at that. Apparently, she was surprised that I knew what she was talking about. Instead of asking though, she stared at me for a long second. I guess you aren't that obsessed. I like to enjoy my life too, you know, I shot back, getting a smirk from her. Sure you do, she rolled her eyes. Well, with the plan explained. Let's get today's session started. I was just about to prepare myself for more physical training like I had done the day before. Her widening Cheshire-like grin stopped me cold though. Remember how I said that dealing with me would give you more than enough experience? At that, I felt a chill run down my spine. What did she? Have fun, kiddo. And then she kicked me on the chest and sent me flying. The worst part was that she seemed to have aimed right in between trees for a good deal of forest, as I flew until I eventually rolled on the ground and finally hit a trunk with my back. I didn't have much time to process my forced new situation, as just when I went to stand up, a growl reached my ears. Turning my head, my shoulders slumped and a sigh escaped my mouth at what I saw. A pack of wolves that were almost certainly bigger than what normal ones were supposed to be. All of them on guard and already starting to circle around me. Now I wish I had been placed in a normal team, I grimaced. With a sigh, I straightened my back and my expression became neutral. Tilting my head to the side, my neck made a cracking sound. That had the intended effect of setting off the wolves. With that done, my hands came up from my sides already carrying a kunai in each that were quickly sent flying. One hit a wolf straight in between the eyes, which stopped it cold, and the other buried itself on another's leg, making it stumble and fall to the ground. I didn't have time to celebrate that small victory though, since I already had to jump and kick a wolf on the back to get me out of the circle I had been placed in. Before I could reach the ground, I spun my body, hitting a close-by canine with my feet and getting it away from my landing spot. 1 down, 3 momentarily distracted, 3 in short range, 5 in mid-range and 2 almost in long range, make that 2 distracted ones I noted as one that I kicked quickly stood up. With a quick succession of hand seals, I fired off a bunch of sparkling shuriken. From the 8 projectiles, only 5 hit their targets. From those only 3 hit good enough spots to kill the wolves. Good thing that the jutsu made it so that even if it didn't kill them, it at least incapacitated them for a bit. But I hadn't waited to see that. By the time that happened, my hands had already finished another set and my Fuuma shuriken flew towards the group, almost cutting one of the beasts in half and wounding 4 others enough that they were as good as done. Only 5 remained. I smirked. Well, what are you waiting for, guys? I taunted unnecessarily, deciding to deal with the last ones with Taijutsu. I probably could have done so from the start too, but I needed more practice with my jutsu and that was as good an excuse as any. There was also the fact that I really enjoyed flinging lightning techniques around. My thoughts though, paused as I finished the last wolf with the kick to the side that cracked its ribs. Looking around at the decimated animals, I felt nothing. I knew I should have felt bad, or at least something. Instead, it was like nothing had happened. I had taken one look at the wolves and the only thought that crossed my mind was they are a threat and thus, I had taken care of it. Granted, that was the right assessment, but still, there was more to it than just that. Some relative of mine would have been disgusted. And I was too, to a degree. But not because of what I'd done or what happened. No, I was disgusted because I didn't feel anything. No regret, guilt or even sadness. Nothing at all. What had I become? I was sure that I wasn't like that before the void. And it was also kind of sad, that I shouldn't feel anything. That it was better if I was like I was instead of feeling bad for doing things like that. Especially considering that I would probably have to kill much more in the future. Especially because I would probably have to kill humans. I took a deep breath in, before my mind derailed down that road. And the moment of thought was broken by a roar that shook my bones. Tilting my head to the side, I grimaced slightly at the sight of a bear the size of a small house. The massive beast charged at me and I stood there as it raised its huge paw. My hands though, were already moving, and before the bear could hit me, I switched places with a branch nearby. Substitution technique has gone up a level. Nice, I thought as my eyes left my assailant and trailed searching for my Fuuma shuriken. This thing wouldn't even feel my shuriken and kunai, let alone my senbon, even if I used sparkling shuriken. No, I needed the extra punch of flashing shuriken to do something to this. And at last, I found it. As I moved towards the weapon, my ears picked up a myriad of noises in the forest besides the bears. Remember how I said that dealing with me would give you more than enough experience? Yeah, I'll get experience all right, I thought to myself with an annoyed grimace. I stopped with my hand mid-air towards the bigger shuriken though, when I noticed a small snake coiled right beside it. I had almost missed, and probably would have, if not for my honed observation skills provided by living with Naruto. A loud crunch behind me told me that, yes, the bear was still there. My grimace intensified as I jumped to the side and turned to assess the situation. I needed to get rid of the snake, so that I could get the Fuuma shuriken back and deal with the bear. I need extra Fuuma shuriken, I noted mentally. Idly though, I noticed with some disappointment that the snake was wise enough to leave the gigantic beast alone. Regardless of that, seeing both animals side to side gave me an idea. With a quick succession of hand seals, I threw a volley of lightning-infused shuriken their way, 2 from one hand, aimed at the snake, and 4 from the other, aimed at the bear's head. One of the ones directed towards the reptile did its job while the ones for the mammals did as well as expected, really. Which is to say that they annoyed it a bit, at most. The beast shook its head slightly as the weapons scratched its fur and growled at me. I clicked my tongue at that. I had hoped that one would get it in the eye or something, honestly. Sadly, hitting a moving target in such specific, small areas was more difficult than it sounded. Come at me, big guy, I said, keeping an ear out for any other animal that may want to join the party we had going. As the bear charged, I took a deep breath in and went through another set of hand seals. I would grind the shit out of substitution now, since animals were a much easier foe to use on than actual people. At least before perfected it so that I didn't need hand seals. This was also an especially good location to practice, since there were fallen branches, trunks and rocks my size basically everywhere. As I switched places behind the beast, I turned and took my Fuuma shuriken. And quickly went through the signs for flashing shuriken as the beat turned to me. It went down quickly as the weapon embedded itself on its head. Flashing shuriken has gone up a level. Nice, I thought to myself as I took a series of deep, slow breaths. With all the threats deal with, I took a moment to calm myself and decide what to do. I didn't remember exactly where I had come flying from, but I had a general idea. With that said, I would have to be careful. There were threats on all sizes here, apparently, from big-ass beasts, like the bear, to small but equally dangerous animals, like the snake. Chakra points, 88/270. I have to use my chakra more efficiently. Evidently, flinging them around isn't gonna cut it, I thought to myself as I looked at the screen. Save the chakra for flashing shurikens, to deal with big shit like the bear. I didn't need to use the jutsu to kill the snake, that was a waste. And I can deal with medium-sized things like the wolves with just taijutsu. With that decided, I turned towards the general direction that I remembered coming from. It was going to be an annoying trip. I could already tell. Experience, indeed, I thought with a smirk. Oh. So, Kakashi-sensei told all of us that we need to improve our chakra control, Naruto explained as the both of us sat at the table to eat. It was almost weird to be by ourselves without someone else visiting, if I was being honest. Sasuke because he wants to expand his jutsu repertoire, I offered with a slight smile. That. He pointed at me with a huge smile. And Sakura needs it for both Genjutsu and Iryaljutsu, whatever she decides to focus on. Sensei asked her but she says she still can't choose. Well, she only took academic electives, so she must be unsure, I shrugged while he hummed. Anyway, I also need that for what he wants to teach me at this point. He started almost bouncing on his seat. He wants to teach me how to use seals mid-battle. Can you believe it? Sounds awesome, I admitted with a wide smile. It's even more than that. The blonde exclaimed. I could set up traps while also kicking ass, it's almost like a dream. I deadpanned at him for that. Of course the first thing that Naruto related combat seals to was with more traps. I didn't even know why I was surprised. He was as obsessed with seals and traps as Canon Naruto was with Beidis Jutsu. How about you, bro? I was left in the middle of a forest full of deadly animals that reached the size of houses and had to fight my way back to the village, I explained calmly, like one would the weather, before taking a bite of my food. Ha ha ha, Naruto laughed. I almost believed it, that was a good one. So, what training did you do? I simply looked up at him and tilted my head, suppressing a smirk. I did sound kind of unbelievable, which was the point of my casual delivery. The blonde blinked at me and then his eyes widened in disbelief. No way, he breathed out in awe. She actually did that. That's so cool. He shouted and I chuckled. Yeah, she also said that we'll do that every day, for an hour or so, after doing actual training, I explained. She'll also be teaching me some more jutsu and I'll start working at the hospital, which reminds me that I'll have to quit my job with the Yamanekas. I won't have the time for it, sadly. Ino won't like that, Naruto said with an amused grin. I snorted. She really wouldn't, since it would mean more work for her when she wasn't training or on missions. Anko-sensei also said that we'll start taking missions tomorrow, I commented. Really? We won't be doing missions for a week still, he whined. Do you even know what D-rank missions are actually like? I raised an eyebrow at him. Yeah, but still, it's better than just training, he grumbled. It'll get boring really fast though. I hope we can do C ranks soon. I went silent after that, the statement reminding me of something that I had almost forgotten. The wave mission. Naruto didn't have the shadow clone technique here. Would that endanger him? He did have his own things now, which meant that he would probably trap the hell out of that bridge if he could. And he also was a lot more competent. Not to mention that Sasuke was probably even better than in canon and Sakura probably wouldn't be useless either. I suppressed a sigh as tried to calm myself. Worrying about it wouldn't help. Everything will be okay. I turned towards Naruto as he spoke, a reassuring smile on his face. I'm the best, believe it. And Sasuke and Sakura are with me. We'll be fine. I grimaced at that. It looked like my feelings had been showing on my face. I know, I said, both to myself and to him. I know. I still worry though. I won't apologize for that. You don't have to. You are still the best, he said with a wide grin. I'll worry too though, he added. You are the best too, Naruto. Believe it, both of us shared a moment of comfortable silence as we continued our meal. This, however, was quickly broken after the meal was done, as the blonde immediately got up and darted towards his room upstairs. Can you take care of the plates, Ig? I need to do something important. And there I sat for a long second, blinking dumbly before I sighed. It better actually be important, because if Naruto had just pulled that to get out of washing the dishes, so help me I would do something drastic. Like not cooking ramen for a month, that would teach the slacker. What was so important? I asked as I walked back into the living room while drying my hands. My interrupted question was due to the rare sight of a nervous Naruto and a few blood-red pieces of clothing on the table. Well, I say nervous, but I had to admit that anyone else wouldn't have noticed, which was a huge improvement from the boy that couldn't lie to his friends to save his life. I hadn't gotten you anything for your birthday, so I've been working on this, he explained, his voice coming off slightly too fast, belying his actual emotions underneath the usual grin. I remembered that you are always complaining about the teachers and such not letting you use weights, so I made this. All of them have weight seals on them. Surprised, I walked up to the table and looked at Naruto's gifts. There was a simple t-shirt and 4 rolls of bandages. All in red, as previously stated. Taking one of the latters, I unfolded it to reveal that there was indeed a black seal on one of the extremes. My eyes widened at the sight of it, after all. When did you learn to sew, let alone this well? I asked in awe, making him scratch the back of his head. Well, I started last year, a month after we started working on calligraphy. Gigi said that seals in clothes are even more complicated, but he would get me a teacher if I wanted to. I've been practicing while you work at the Yamanekas. So, you kept this a secret from me? I asked, carefully keeping my voice from sounding accusatory. I was merely curious, after all. Well, at this he grew shy, and I already knew that he would say something that would be very wholesome. I wanted my first work to be a gift for you, and a surprise, so here we are. Thank you, Naruto, really, I breathed out, touched. And stop acting so nervous, that's not like you. I love it. I absolutely love it. Now I feel bad for how little effort went into my gifts. Don't! He exclaimed instantly before growing bashful. They were great, the best, really. I just wanted to even things out, he muttered, uncharacteristically shy as one of his hands went to his necklace that matched mine. The clothes were great too, I've noticed less people glaring at me, actually. I think they've helped. And the necklace is the best thing ever, and everything else you give me, like the seal supplies and such. It's more than enough, really. I wanted to give you something in return, is all. Instead of saying something, I just walked up to him and gave his arm a squeeze. He grinned at me and I grinned back. Oh, he blinked and his eyes widened a bit, seemingly remembering something. Also, I talked with Gigi, and he said that it would be a nice gift. But that I could only add one more seal every 2 weeks. And that's with permission from your sensei too. He was very insistent. I took a moment to wonder if Hiruzen had strong-armed everyone into denying me weights just for Naruto's gift. Oddly enough, I could see that happening. And I didn't even have enough in me to be angry about the whole thing if that were true. I was, actually, very content with how things had turned out. I would have to ask the Hokage and thank him if my assumption was right. It's good enough for me, I reassured him before my expression turned into a deadpan. Also, it's getting late. Ig 3. We were having a moment here. Couldn't you forget the bedtime for one night? He whined, like I had betrayed his trust in the worst way. No, because I know you waited until just before your bedtime on purpose, I countered neutrally, and his shoulders slumped. I'm a damn genin now, he grumbled under his breath. You can't keep me on a bedtime forever. And I'll stop as soon as you start cooking, and night, brother. And like that, the little troublemaker was gone. Standing alone in the living room, I smiled softly at the red roll of cloth still in my hand. Oh! Flashing shuriken has gone up a level. Very, very nice, I thought to myself as the screen appeared and the monstrous tiger in front of me fell. Lightning release, flashing shuriken LVL8. D-rank technique with which the user launches a lightning-infused Fuma shuriken at their target. The weapon also has increased cutting power according to level. Hand seals 3. Consumption 16 chakra points per shuriken. I almost prefer the reductions of consumption than the ones in hand seals. I grimaced. Checking my chakra reserves and seeing that I had less than a half remaining. Why couldn't I be a chakra monster like the ones in the series, that could throw jutsu around like nobody's business? Internal grumbling aside, my week of training in the Forest of Death had turned out to be very productive. Substitution and flashing shuriken especially, had benefited greatly from it. Also, being quite honest, I was waiting for my stats to start going up. After all, I thought as I tugged at the end of my shirt, taking a moment to feel the noticeable but not cumbersome weight of the clothing my brother had made. It was good that the bandages around my calves and forearms were hidden under the coat and pant, and the red shirt was already part my outfit beforehand, so I didn't have to worry about them being an eyesore or anything. Almost there, buddy, I muttered with a smirk as I pinned a snake to a trunk next to me with a kunai. Dexterity has gone up a level. New perk acquired, Bloodhound. My smirk widened. Perk at Dexterity 30. But then what was the deal with Autodidact? Or is it every time a stat reaches a multiple of 10? That'd be weird. In the end, I gave up my theories and pulled up the new perk screen. Bloodhound. The user's dexterity is increased by 10% when facing a bleeding foe. That sounds like dexterity perk a lot more than Autodidact did with Constitution. Anyway, this is a very good perk. I just have to worry about nicking my enemies fast, and from there the fights get easier, I mused, my eyes darting to the side where a panther tried to stalk me. Should remember to do something nice for Naruto. These weights are already paying off. The pitch black feline jumped at me, or tried to, since it got stuck on a net of ninja wire that I had set up previously with shuriken. The threads had been left loose enough for the beast to get tangled in it, and just right for me to proceed. I should feel bad about the massacres that I do in this forest, I thought as I finished the jutsu and took a hold of the wire, electrocuting the panther to death. I had to overpower the jutsu for that though, considering how weak it normally was. That wasted twice as much chakra points, but saving all of them for flashing shuriken ended with me having chakra to spare. So, I had decided to just use one of my other jutsu here and there. I almost feel like I have gamer's mind, might be a world thing though. Anko positively preens every time she evaluates me on this. Looks damn proud of me and all. Stunning thread has gone up a level. And that means, yep, one less chakra point used in the jutsu. Nice, I thought with a lazy smile. I expected the Forest of Death to be more dangerous though, I thought to myself. Stalking someone was complicated. Doing so while also taking care of a garden was slightly harder. Doing both while also under the supervision of a Takubetsu Jounin that couldn't find out of the first was a pain in the ass, to say the least. However, I managed, somehow, or she didn't mention it. I liked to think that it was the first. Gardening has gone up a level. I have enough to keep track of right now, game, I thought, withholding a grimace. I didn't like complaining about the system, but the timing was terrible sometimes. And that's that, Anko announced then, breaking me from my introspection, and I stood up, with the last bits of weeds on my hands. And indeed, the garden looked better than ever. I was kind of proud, since it had been an absolute mess when we arrived. No wonder they handed a mission for this. I gotta say though, it's the first time I've seen someone so enthusiastic about a D-rank mission, my sensei commented with a smirk. I shrugged. I have a garden at home, and I like taking care of it. It's relaxing, I explained, although I suspected that she knew at least the first part. That profile she had read was very thorough, it seemed. If you say so. Anyway, with the boring part out of the way and the physical and fighting training done, we can start with the part that you really want to do, she declared with a grin. One would think that the one excited was her instead of me. Not that she was wrong, since she was talking about starting my training with the 3 new jutsus. As we made our way back to the training ground though, I let my mind wander to other things. No need to get nervous or overexcited about the new techniques. Instead, I recalled the last week. Just like she had said, we had done one D-rank mission every day and left it at that, no matter if the mission was short or long. I had yet to get any other scrolls from my mystery benefactor, but I wasn't too worried. They had proved to be somewhat reliable after the last few years. It probably only meant that I had to do several tasks before they gave me more. Which wasn't a problem, really, since I was still studying the one they had given me first. It turns out that jutsu creation was hard. Shocking, I know. It involved a lot of study, analysis and estimation of everything, from chakra coils to hand seals, passing through affinities and a lot of other things. There were 3 scrolls on the introduction series alone. And then there were a specialized series for every type of release. Hopefully, I'll get a skill for this, because otherwise I won't be creating anything anytime soon, I thought to myself. Sometime through my musings, we had delivered the scroll confirming that I had indeed done the mission and arrived at the Forest of Death, our usual training grounds. And here we are, Anko announced unnecessarily as she spread her arms signaling the forest. It was like I was coming here for the first time. Now, about those jutsus I told you about. It's time to properly try, so, what do you think? I think I'm good, I nodded, confidently, mentally going over the 3 scrolls I had read over the last week. Really, all of them? At my nod, she smirked. Okay, Wonder Boy, if you think you got it, give Embers a try. And right as she finished the sentence, my hands flew through the 4 seals of the jutsu. Right as I finished the last seal, the chakra that had concentrated in my lungs felt like it burned me without actually doing damage. Keeping my head as calm as possible, I shaped a circle with my thumb and index in front of my mouth and blew, mentally nudging the chakra out of me. The fireball wasn't that big. While Great Fireball was as big as an average room, and the normal fireball was as big as a person, Embers was around the size of a torso. Maybe I should use other things to compare their size with, I mused idly as I saw the flame fly through the air until it hit the tree I had been aiming for. New skill acquired, Fire Manipulation LVL1. New skill acquired, Fire Release, Embers LVL1. With a confused frown, I pulled the new skills screens up. Fire Manipulation LVL1. Increases control of fire according to level. Fire Jutsu use 0.5% less chakra. Fire Jutsu are 0.5% more effective. The user is 0.5% more resistant to fire. Oh, now I understand, I thought with a mental nod. Same skill, really, but the values are lower because it's not my affinity. Interesting that. Wonder if it has a higher max level so that I can get it to be a second affinity of sorts etherized to myself. Fire release, Embers LVL1. E-rank technique with which the user launches a small fireball at a target. Hand seals 4. Consumption 10 chakra points. Nothing strange here, I noted before dismissing all screens and turning towards my sensei with a pleased expression. I had to pause at the strange look she wore. You know, kiddo. I think I'm starting to see why they chose me as your teacher, she said, although she seemed to be speaking more to herself than to me. I tilted my head in confusion. I still wonder though. Sensei? I asked, voicing my confusion as her voice grew lower the more she spoke. Doesn't matter, she shook off with a shrug. This one jutsu is more important than you realize, Anko stressed, wearing a mildly serious look on her face. Your affinity is lightning, which doesn't do well against air jutsu users. Fire, on the other hand, works better against those. So we are basically covering for one of your weaknesses with this. That explains why she didn't hand me a water jutsu, I thought while nodding. I had been wondering about that while studying the scrolls. Water would have added a new edge to my already good lightning techniques. But I could safely say that I was decently powerful. So, covering my weak points sounded better than improving my strong ones. Anyway, next one, kiddo. Wow me with your prodigiousness, student of mine, she ordered, switching between somewhat serious tone to her more usual mocking one. I took note that she didn't say anything this time about me being ready or not. Instead of doing as told, I stared at her until she raised an eyebrow at me. Then, I simply took a deep breath in and concentrated on the jutsu. And, as my chakra this time concentrated on both my palms, I threw my hands in front of me right before they cackled with energy and lightning flew at yet another tree. Lightning release, electromagnetic strike LVL1. D-rank technique with which the user creates a wave of electricity from their hands. Hand seals 5. Consumption 20 chakra points. One scary kid, all right, old man, I heard Anko muttering behind me. Had the Hokage told her something about me? Well, that's 2 out of 3, she added, this time actually speaking to me. Last one, brat, and then we train for real. Something about her tone told me that she didn't mean our now usual training, and that realization made me shiver internally. So, deciding to focus on less concerning thoughts, I settled for attempting the lightning flicker. And so I did, or tried to, at least. Why tried? Well. Ha 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 ha, I groaned as Anko laughed her ass off. I pushed myself off the ground and arched my back, trying to will the pain away. You don't push with both feet, brat. You have to use one to stop yourself. Otherwise, well, you don't, and that means you fly in whatever direction you stepped towards. Would have been nice to know beforehand. The scroll didn't say that, I'm sure of it, I grumbled as I cracked my neck, still trying to get over my hit against the tree trunk. This time, I was a lot less eager to use the jutsu. Understandable, if you asked me, considering that it was also the first one that I had failed so terribly at from the first attempt. It's so nice to see prodigies fail, she said, as if that was explanation enough, which made my eye twitch in annoyance. What is it with my failures that amuse people so much? I wondered. So, what you waiting for, kiddo? I almost snarled at that, but pushed my annoyance down and took a deep breath in. As I finished the hand seals, lightning appeared at the sole of my feet, cackling as they danced around them, almost going up to my ankles. Recalling Anko's advice, I took my first step forward. The movement increased to ridiculous levels as I all but disappeared forward. My eyes couldn't keep up with it, actually, barely able to discern that I had gone past the point that I wanted to. Realizing that, I used my other feet to stop myself. The stop itself wasn't that bad, really. It was the seconds after that which affected me more. It was just like that feeling when you are sitting or lying down and stand up a tad too quickly. That disorienting moment when you lose focus and you can barely distinguish anything around you. My chest seemed to close in itself, the pressure of anxiety constraining my lungs. Anko's distant voice reached me just before I could panic with a flashback of the void. That happens too. I had half a mind to throw a kunai her way. The moment of fright affecting my emotions more than I would have liked. I took a deep calming breath in as my sight cleared slowly. Also, you might want to start with shorter distances. It's easier to get the feel of it if you start short and increase range slowly. I closed my eyes and continued breathing deeply, as I considered her words. That makes sense, I mused to myself. It sounds like a skill thing, actually. Sounds about right, I voiced as my eyes opened and looked around, finding a direction where I wouldn't smack myself against a tree if something went wrong. Locking on it, I turned to my sensei for a moment before pausing at the expression she was wearing. Something the matter? I should be asking that. You all right, kiddo? She asked, her face showing an unexpected amount of concern. Yeah, I said, internally cursing as her disbelief showed. After a second of considering how to lie, I decided that I couldn't do that. Blatantly lying to a Jounin's face was a bad idea, not to mention useless. Still, I couldn't just out and tell her that I almost had a flashback from when I was dead. I don't do well with sense losses, I said simply, grimacing as I did so. That's all. Makes sense, she hummed. Regardless, you should get over it. There's lots of genjutsu that do specifically that, if only for a second or two before you dissipate them. My grimace intensified as I realized that what she said was true. Okay, how do you think we should do that? I muttered under my breath. I'll hit you with those while you train in the forest, of course, she announced, let out a tired sigh at her chipper tone. Of course, I breathed out before turning to my previous exercise. Short step, not long, I mentally chanted before going through the seals again. This time, as soon as I did the first step, I moved my second foot to stop. New skill acquired, lightning release, lightning flicker LVL1. There it is, I cheered internally before calling the skills screen. Lightning release, lightning flicker LVL1. D-rank technique with which the user infuses lightning on their legs to propel themselves in one direction. Hand seals 5. Range 2 meters. Consumption 20 chakra points. Sounds about right, I nodded to myself as I recovered from the dizziness, this time much more calm than before. Still, I kept taking deep breaths in while waiting. Definitely gotta work on that, I heard Anko say. But don't worry, kiddo, you are still a kamidamned prodigy. Course I am, I bragged half-heartedly after a sigh. So, what are we? Why are you grinning like that? I asked nervously as I looked at her. Well, we've expanded your repertoire, she casually explained as she started walking closer. Meanwhile, I took a step back. And that means you have to get used to it, but I've noticed that you have a little too easy a time with the forest, so we'll add some difficulty to that. Wow, really? I replied with mock cheer in my voice, breaking out in a cold sweat. Sounds awesome. She hummed, beaming at me, and I almost whimpered. I had a really bad feeling about this. I would take part myself in this, but I don't want to kill you. My shoulders sagged in relief and I let out a breath that I hadn't realized I had been holding. Then the last word registered in my mind and I tensed up. Her widening grin didn't reassure me at all. So, what are you? Oh, fuck this time, I did whimper. Why? Well, because behind my sensei appeared two gigantic snakes, slithering their way towards us before circling around both Anko and me. They weren't Manda-sized, probably around half his size. But it was still a hell of a lot bigger than anything I had faced in the Forest of Death, and that was saying something. Yeah, that's the reaction I expected, my sensei said, still grinning from ear to ear. Did you know that I signed the summoning contract with the Snake Clan? A gift that I'm sure my old sensei regrets. I can't use all of them, but there's a good deal of snakes that listen to me still. These two were kind enough to volunteer to train you. Aren't they nice? I didn't know if snakes could smirk, but both of them gave me the expression of doing just that as they eyed me. I gulped. Sensei, did I ever do something to piss you off, by any chance? I asked hesitantly, making her tilt her head to the side. No, why? She asked, with the most fake innocent face I had ever seen. Just checking. Believe me, IG, if you had, you would know. I gulped. Now, let's start. He is all yours, guys. Damn it. Oh. Poison resistance has gone up a level. That thing bit me. I screamed wide-eyed and holding my arm, barely keeping my nervousness and fear in control. Right, Anko nodded, as the huge snakes from before rested lazily on a patch of light that passed through the trees, a smaller, pitchback snake resting on her shoulders. This little one's very young and her venom hasn't developed yet. It will paralyze your arm for the rest of the day, but that's about it, she explained before she shrugged and I sighed in relief. For a second there, I thought that she was crazier than I had expected. Then I looked at my left arm before clicking my tongue and pulling out a bandage to wrap around the bite. When I finished, I turned to my sensei and... I'm sensing a pattern here. Why is it that half the time I look at her she changes attitude because of something? Something the matter? I asked, feeling like I was repeating myself. First of all, you are taking being poisoned considerably calmer than normal. That isn't that much of a surprise, you are one weird kid. After all, my eye twitched, but I decided to take that one as a compliment. You can move your shoulder though, and that isn't normal at all, even for your levels of weird. I gulped, wondering how I could phrase a half-truth in order to cover for my poison resistance train. You've been poisoning yourself to build resistance. She voiced, her face twisting into a combination between awed and disturbed. That's a whole new level of crazy, IG, her use of my actual name making my back straighten. Explain, right now. I've been covering Senbon with small doses of paralytic poison from the plants from my garden, I explained, trying to keep my voice calm. The cat was out of the bag already, and trying to lie wouldn't do anything for me. We covered a bit about build poison immunity during medical training and I wanted to add that to my skill set. After I finished speaking, there was silence. I looked at her with neutral expression that often twitched due to my nerves betraying me. Meanwhile, she continued staring at me, her expression not changing from that impressed and horrified expression, although it gradually gained some thoughtful hints. Explain better, don't leave any details out, Anko ordered, a frown appearing on her face as she started eyeing me more like a project than a person. And so, I told her all about my poison resistance training, how much I used, how often and when I had started. Once I finished, she let out a sigh and pinched the bridge of her nose before regarding me with an exasperated expression. Well, you are an idiot, but you were smart about it. You actually did it a lot more safely than I would have expected. It reduced your efficiency, but it's better than risking it, I guess. I kept my mouth shut during the whole thing and even afterwards. I didn't know if I had gotten myself in trouble. I had the strange impression that I wasn't, but I should. It was a weird feeling, actually. Yeah, I definitely see why they wanted me to train you, she muttered to herself. I think I'll have to rethink your training schedule. If you are this crazy about growing stronger. Yeah, I can accommodate you. There was the slightest bit of hesitation on her tone, but it was quickly covered by a determined expression. Prepare yourself, kiddo. We'll have lots of fun. I was quickly realizing that her grins would always unnerve me. Oh. Naruto, I think I hate you, I groaned as I stood up from where I had fallen after hitting the wall at speeds that no wall should be hit at. Or at least, at speeds that I shouldn't hit walls. The blonde had the gall to smirk smugly at me. Oh, you are so going down, you brat, I said, passively hitting my brother with a tiny amount of bloodlust. He paled quickly, realizing his mistake. IG, bro, you know I just wanted you to see what my seals can do, that's all. I swear. He quickly tried to excuse himself. I was having none of it. That's why you specifically told me to use the flicker, right? You totally didn't want to put a seal on one of my legs to mess with my jutsu and have me flying against something. Yeah, I really can't see you doing that for shits and giggles, I said, sarcasm dripping from my voice. Color continued draining from his face as I stepped forward slowly. He seemed to have realized that there was no escaping his just punishment. Should have known better than to prank IG, honestly, Ino voiced, gaining a sage nod from everyone present, which was everyone in our group, surprisingly enough. Getting the whole gang together had become difficult after graduating, but we managed to meet up separately as much as possible. Roughly an hour later, we were all sitting inside and resting. Naruto groaning as he laid on the couch and recovering from the beatdown he received for his prank, and the rest of us sitting around the table with a teacup in front of us. As usual during our meetups, we were comment about what we had been doing with our teachers and during missions. Or complaining, more like. You are so lucky that you don't have to go on so many D ranks. They are. It was Ino's turn right then. Tell me about it. We had to go after Madame Shijimi Cat, Tora, yesterday. A general shudder followed Sakura's statement. All of us had had to do that mission at least once. Anko had gotten a particularly nice laugh when the damned cat scratched my cheek before I got it under control. That thing was faster, smarter and meaner than any cat had any right to be. So, what did your crazy sensei train you with, today? Shika asked me, making the with his fingers. I rolled my eyes at him as I took my turn. A few hours later, I sat at the same place at the same table. This time though, I was alone. Alone with a piece of paper in front of me, slowly writing my newest report about the mission I took that day. This was the 10th paper I delivered since that first scroll was handed to me. I was starting to wonder how many I would have to do before I got the next one. I wasn't that surprised by the delay though. Those were important scrolls, I knew. And I was still learning from the first one anyway. They were either waiting for me to finish the first or for me to do more reports. Despite how much I wanted the rest of the series, it was something that apparently was reserved for Hai Chunin, so I could wait. This was the quickest way to get my hands on the information. I had questioned Anko about it, with actual curiosity about how hard it would be to get my hands on jutsu creation books or scrolls. She had rolled her eyes at me, muttering about training and power-obsessed people, before telling me that I was a whole rank too low for that. My musings were interrupted though, as a scroll appeared innocently where my last paper had been. And sure enough, on the side it read, Jutsu Creation, Introduction. Part 2. Well, I thought to myself as I eyed the item. Color me surprised. I took a deep breath in, pushing nervous thoughts regarding my mystery benefactor out of my mind. I had already decided that worrying about it was not worth it. And considering that I was actively going along with it now with the missions, I really hope this doesn't come and bite me in the ass later, I grimaced before standing up and going to sleep. It was 1 month after we all graduated from the academy that I found myself looking intently at my status screen. IG Sata. Title, Anko Mitarashi's Apprentice. Energy points, 620/620. Chakra points, 465/465. Strength, 31. Dexterity, 34. Constitution, 31. Chakra, 31. Chakra control, C. It had undergone several changes through the week, most of which thanks to my now not so new weighted clothes. All my stats had grown like nobody's business, and I had made sure to thank Naruto at every chance I got and spoil the guy rotten with food, although I had to make sure that it wasn't always ramen, for diet sake. The biggest change though, was one that brought a smile to my face every time I looked at it. It was understandable too, I thought, since it should have sat at 310 right now, but instead I had a whooping 465 instead. Why? Well, that was thanks to the perk I got when Chakra and Constitution had hit 30. It seemed that all stats gave a perk at 30. Which brought the question of why Autodidact had appeared at 20, but I had given up on that mystery. Case in point, the new perks. Calm Spirit. Increases chakra point gain for every chakra level by 50%. That one was the best, in my opinion at least. Bloodhound was cool and all, but considering how restricting my chakra pool had been ever since I seriously started training jutsu, I was very grateful for Calm Spirit. I had been a little concerned at first, since such a change to my chakra would have been very noticeable, but at least it had slowly grown over the week since I had gotten it. It was still a drastic change, but nobody had said anything so far, which I took as a good thing. The other two new perks weren't bad either, I had to admit. Resilience, basic. The user recovers from injuries slightly faster than normal. Resilience had been the Constitution perk, and I had to admit that it was great. I was nowhere near Naruto's regenerative powers, but it was noticeable nonetheless. And it was probably tied for second favorite with Bloodhound since it helped heal all my training injuries, which helped me keep training. The strength one though, was by far my least favorite. Knockout. Increases the chances of knocking the opponent out with a hit. At first it sounded cool, but it didn't have any numerical value for a reason. The increase was either very small or more situational than it let on, since I hadn't noticed it taking effect so far. Anyway, it was so. Brat, either you snap out of it or I smack you. The annoyed voice of my teacher woke me from my musings and I grimaced. We were currently making our way towards one of the village's gates. Why? Well, I was going on my first C-rank mission. Nothing too fancy though. A simple patrol mission, not even that far from the village, which was what made it C-rank instead of B-rank. There was little chance of encountering another ninja. It was, however, a mission that would take more than one day, which had Naruto whining like a baby at the injustice of me going on a C rank and getting to be outside the village. The rest of the group showed several levels of annoyance too, since they were still stuck doing D ranks and much more often than I had. Still, no one had really complained, for which I was grateful. I really didn't feel like dealing with actual envy. The dangerous kind, I mean. Back to the present though, I was slightly nervous, I would admit. Maybe I was being paranoid, or just a plain idiot, but I couldn't help but worry about something like what happened to Team 7 happening to me. Which is to say, something messing up my mission and turning it into a higher ranked one. Regardless, I tried to calm myself down by reading through my skill list. Anko had kept her word about accommodating my seemingly unreasonable desire for power and upped the training like there was no tomorrow. And thus, my skills had improved by leaps and bounds through the weeks. The Forest of Death was a great training ground to grind them, and Anko-sensei's snake summons were even better, even if I couldn't beat them. I was actually kind of sad that they couldn't join in on the training every day. Still, I had maxed several skills through that time. The first one had been free running, which was not a surprise at all, since it had already been pretty close to maximum. Also, almost all my Shuriken Jutsu ones, for example, had maxed out except for Fuuma's Shuriken throwing. Intermediate Taijutsu 2, which had given way to its improved version, just like basic Taijutsu had done. Advanced Taijutsu LVL2 increases the skill of the user in hand-to-hand combat according to skill level. Increases the user's physical stats by 2% when fighting without a weapon. I was surprised by the change from intermediate Taijutsu, since this one didn't have an active effect. However, I was happier with this, actually, since it gave the bonus without cost and all the time. The last skill to be maxed was calligraphy. And while that was awesome, it made me grimace every time. Why? Well, I would have been more than happy to start training Fuinjutsu, but I simply didn't have the time. A shame that, really, but considering the time it had taken me to max the skill, I just didn't think I could get it to a decent enough level to be used before shit hit the fan. So, I reluctantly pushed the seal arts to the side and focused on what I was already training in. Training that was going very well, if I said so myself. All my jutsu had progressed incredibly fast. Even those that weren't actively used when Anko threw me into the Forest of Death, like Genjutsu or the Transformation or Clones technique. Those Anko made a point of having me train before fighting some days. This not only made it so that I could grind those, and keep them up to speed in her mind, but also added difficulty to my fights since it exhausted my chakra pool. Besides that, I had also started working part-time at the Shinobi Hospital, as Anko had said. That had led to me learning my first C-rank jutsu. Healing Palm Technique LVL3. C-rank technique with which the user helps a target recover from wounds using their chakra through their hands. Hand seals 5. Consumption 9 chakra points per second. It wasn't the mystical palms jutsu, being much slower to heal and also incapable of healing internal injuries, but it was a start. I would take what I could. Maybe I could get my hands on the higher level technique in the future. My teacher had also started teaching me about poisons whenever I was too spent to continue fighting in the forest. First of all, she had demanded I train my poison resistance in her presence, which I had no problems at all with. And second, she had started teaching me about making my own mixes instead of just using the poison directly from the plants. She had also covered everything, from gathering venom from spiders, snakes and the like to actually concocting the dangerous substances. This had given me yet another skill to work on. Poison crafting LVL5 improves the quality of poisons crafted by the user by 25%. I had flown through the first few levels, to be honest. It was probably due to my medical training and pre-existing knowledge, mixed with Anko's teaching and the title I had. Still, it was very nice to see such fast progression. As I mused over my progress, Anko and I had already made our way through the village and outside the walls. I was kind of surprised that tree hopping wasn't a thing. Or, it was, just not as depicted in the anime. Instead it was just, free running through the treetops, really. Yet another thing, I guess I thought to myself as I followed my sensei. This mission, I would just follow and observe. However, the next one I would have to do on my own and Anko would simply correct me if I did something wrong. It was reasonable, since I had never done any of these and she had never actually taught me the process. She had said she should have, but she preferred to simply teach by showing instead of by lecture. I was more than fine with that. The same would happen with any C ranks that I had to take in the future under her. I just hoped that if we met trouble, it would be the expected sort instead of the unexpected one. Oh. Good, you are taking to this as easily as expected, you little monster, Anko said, more amused than annoyed this time. She was getting used to my bullshit, in her words. As for what we were working on, it turns out that tree hopping is a thing and I just hadn't been taught it until now. I had the strong suspicion that my sensei had left it until now so that she could counter the boredom. Which was very real, by the way, 5 days in and nothing had happened at all. And I could enjoy the sights only so much considering that it was all the same forest everywhere. Hopping technique LVL10. E-rank technique with which the user can jump between mid-range distances. Range 20 meters. Consumption 5 chakra points. It was nice that it didn't need hand seals, because damn it would have been annoying to use until it was maxed. The good thing though, was that it was the simplest technique I had learned so far. It worked kinda opposite to how tree climbing did, since I had to push the surface instead of clinging to it. It reminded me of those times where I would put too much chakra on my feet while learning the chakra control exercise. It also leveled very fast, which I was grateful for. And so, we continued moving through the forest, stopping at checkpoints and looking for anything that seemed remotely out of place. Something like that, I guess I muttered under my breath when Anko signaled to stop, her whole body tense and ready for battle. The reason for that were 2 people tree hopping some distance away from us, their path being a beeline towards Konoha. I reassured myself with the fact that they were so blatant about it that it couldn't possibly mean trouble for us. Raider? Anko asked, her voice shocked and tinged with worry. There went any reassurance, I thought, as we got closer and saw that both people were very much wounded. One of them had a Konoha forehead protector, which I guessed was the one my sensei recognized, but the other one didn't. That last fact was slightly confusing, if I was being honest. Anko. The one with the headband replied, his voice strained due to the injuries. Brat, get over here, you give my friend a hand and I'll treat the other guy, Anko ordered instantly, which made sense. The Konoha ninja looked much better than the other one, and that was saying something considering that this raider person looked like he could barely stand still. Sir, yes, sir, I said mockingly, even if I was already with my game face on and readying healing palm. Anko had doubtlessly rubbed off on me, I guessed. If you could lay down, Raider-san. I politely asked the man, who simply nodded and sat down against a tree instead of actually doing what I asked. I simply rolled with it, he was the higher rank anyway. So, this is the brat you brag so much about. The man spoke for the first time after a few minutes, during which I had treated the worst of his wounds. I had closed most of the shallow injuries with healing palm and stabilized anything too serious for the jutsu to work with first aid. I let out a long breath once I finished, and turned towards Anko, who was still treating the other guy, her palms shining with blue chakra as she worked. Didn't know you knew healing jutsu, I said tiredly. Brat, there's tons of things about me that you don't know, she muttered through her teeth, her eyes not moving from her patient and her hands not even hesitating at what they were doing. It was awe-inspiring, I would admit. Just stabilize him, Anko Raider said, and I realized why he hadn't wanted to lay down before. He stayed sitting, but his eyes darted around everywhere, looking for a threat. Evidently, whatever had attacked them was still out there, or he expected someone else to come finish the job. Who the hell even is this guy? Anko asked, half curious, half irritated. I took that moment to look at the other guy. Raider I could kind of recognize. At least I knew he was a named character. That wheel-like scar on his face pulled a string in my memories. I would have to check my notes when I finally made it back home. The other guy though, I had absolutely no idea. He looked plain, with brown hair and fair skin. There was no distinct feature on him. Honestly, the man looked like one of those background characters that authors just don't bother detailing. As mean as that sounded even in my head. There was a long, silent pause to answer Anko's question. Okay, I get it. My sensei was clearly running out of fucks to give, if her tone was anything to go by. IG, this guy looks lighter than Raider, disable your weights and carry him on your back. I wordlessly did the seal Naruto taught me to make the weight seals stop working and picked up the guy. He had apparently passed out sometime during his treatment, which was honestly no surprise at all. As I picked him up though, I heard Raider's complaints behind me as Anko apparently picked him up. I decided that I was better off not interfering with that. Let's go, brat, full speed and don't stop until we reach Konoha. If you can't go on, say the word and I'll give you a soldier pill, Anko said before hopping on a tree. I followed right behind her as I activated running and free running just to not be left behind. Good thing I hadn't been using energy points throughout the trip. Is he really a genin? I heard Raider say in front of me. You don't even know the half of it, Anko replied, although the tinge of pride in her voice reached my ears. The injured Konohanin chuckled, which promptly turned into pained coughs. Oh. Quest complete, finish your first C-rank mission. Rewards. +1 to all physical stats. Chakra has gone up a level. Wonder when chakra will stop leveling alongside the physical stats. I mused idly. I really didn't expect you to be the I told you so type of guy, Anko grumbled next to me as we walked. I didn't even say anything, I said with a raised eyebrow. It's written all over your damn face, brat, she countered with a snarl. Meanwhile, I kept silent, but my smirk spoke volumes. It was nice to throw in her face that my worries before the mission hadn't been unwarranted. I swear I've done 100 C ranks without anything happening in them, but I go in one with you, everything goes to shit. You telling me your first C rank was normal? I asked in genuine curiosity, earning a raised finger. Then she hesitated and closed her mouth before any sound left it. Point, she conceded, and my smirk grew. It was amusing though, to know that something had actually happened during her first C rank. I would have to ask for that story some other time. But you are paying for the dango today, Just because you are an annoying little shit and because you earned your first C rank pay, she added quickly before I got a word out. At that, my smirk disappeared, replaced with a frown. Ultimately, I just sighed. Anko was a great teacher, I would admit, but she was also a pain to deal with outside of her teaching duties. It was like dealing with a Naruto that was far stronger and knew it. Not fun at all, let me tell you. Still, she wasn't bad, just annoying. You were thinking something that would make me smack you, weren't you? Don't know what you are talking about, I replied instantly, keeping a perfectly straight face. Anyway, about the dango, I've been thinking about trying my hand with making them myself. Would you mind testing them for me? I asked, effectively deflecting the conversation from a very dangerous topic. Oh. You think you can cook the food of the gods up to my delicate tastes? She asked with a raised eyebrow. If you are anything like Naruto, I could cook the shittiest dango ever and you would still rejoice, I thought to myself. Obviously, I didn't say that though. You are really pushing it, brat. I didn't say anything. I protested only to receive an unimpressed stare. I thought I had a better poker face than that, I grumbled, making my teacher snort. It's actually scarily good, but I'm a T&I expert. You might as well be an open book to me, brat, she explained. And don't think you are off the hook. I expect double as many dango for whatever you were thinking about me. Troublesome. Inviting her to my house turned out to be a very bad idea though. Naruto and Anko got into a very heated debate about what was better, ramen or dango. It was frankly one of the most amusing and annoying moments of my life. I was never making that mistake again. Overall though, I was content. The C rank hadn't gone as well as I would have wanted it to. But at least I hadn't gotten myself into Zabuza levels of bullshit, which was good enough on my books. If only I had known. Oh. I was very surprised that night, when a piece of paper appeared on my table. That in itself was a somewhat normal occurrence, I would admit. What wasn't normal was the contents written in it. My assignment was very different from everything I had done so far. There were not proposals to analyze, no task to be done. Instead, there was a summarized history narration. At the end of the paper laid a simple question. What would you do? I read with a frown. Going back to the scenario, it was difficult. It detailed two nations at war, with one asking for outside support. That was basically it. There were no details about what side was winning, although it could be inferred though. The problem was, with absolutely no idea of what was going on, making a decision was practically tossing a coin. In the end, I sighed and turned the paper around, starting to write. As I did though, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this paper than I was getting. And for the life of me, I couldn't decipher just what it was. Oh. Third-person POV. The weary old man set the papers on his desk and took a long drag from his smoking pipe before letting it out as a sigh. What do you think? The fire shadow asked his own shadow. Do you want me to tell you what I would like to do or what I think is best? The other person on the room asked back instead, his non-bandaged eye looking out the window on his comrade's office. Both. I would like to leave them to their devices. Let them destroy each other out and swoop in once they are too weak to respond, the old warork answered bluntly before letting out a sigh of his own. However, I can admit that it could be a mistake should they retain enough power afterwards. They would never look at us the same way, the Hokage nodded grimly. It could be as bad as driving them to ally themselves with our enemies. I thought we were in times of peace, Danza Shimura couldn't help but jab, a hint of mockery in his voice, before clicking his tongue. There are always enemies and allies, even in peace, Hiruzen Sarutobi replied with a sad smile. There's no correct answer, anything we do will be a gamble. What gamble to take, is the question. I say don't do it, you say do it, the war orc summarized, without even having to hear his comrade's opinion on the matter. How about a tiebreaker? He asked, taking a piece of paper from inside his robe and placing it on the desk in front of the Hokage, who took it and read it over. You would have us use this as tiebreaker over the council. You've already talked about it with them and they are as divided as we are. If we follow that, we would do nothing at all. Which I find myself having to remind you, is not the same as what I want. Ultimately, what is the difference, really? And this isn't a pride matter. Following my example, you said. It's not, Hiruzen. If it was, I wouldn't have brought it up, you can see for yourself, he interrupted, pointing at the paper. And, indeed, the Hokage could see what his comrade was talking about. The paper's content was interesting, to say the least. Not at all what he would have expected, really. He did see hints of things Danzo would approve of, but overall. You would have us make such a decision on a genin's thoughts? He asked eventually, his tone neutral. Do you disagree with what he wrote? The other man asked back. Besides, this is no normal genin we are talking about, at all, Danzo pointed out before leaving the window and walking around the room until he stood in front of the desk. And yes, I did say that I'm following your example. It has helped alleviate some concerns of mine. After those words, nothing was said. The leader of the village pondering both the thoughts written on the page and his own. Eventually, another stream of smoke left the Hokage's mouth. And then, the silence was broken. We are doing it, Hiruzen decided. Very well, Danzo nodded, his expression unreadable, just like his leader's. The leaf is stepping into the Mist's war. That's it, guy, for now. Hope you like the video. Like, share and subscribe the channel. Thanks for watching.